Come to our presentation and you'll learn how to make your business a hard target for cybercriminals. We'll give you some basic steps that you can take to make your enterprise as secure as we can possibly make it. How to make your business a hard target for cybercriminals. Because, you know, these days, the reality of cybercrime is it's industrialized. You know, you've got bodies out there that want to exploit your company. They want to take your data. They want to extract that ransom. So, you know, we need to make sure that when they're selecting a victim, that, you know, unfortunately for the other person, that they choose somebody else, not you. We need to try and find some ways to make you a compelling target not to be chosen for that next attack. Now, it's a business model, you know, and if you apply those business skills that you have to what's happening here, you know, it does track to all of the common business models, you know. Scale is more important than skill, speed is far better than sophistication, and all of these attacks are based off a return on investment. And with this return on investment, those bad guys want to make sure that they're not burning any of their assets, they're not unnecessarily using their 0 days, they're not exposing their techniques, you know, so they're going to pick the easiest targets possible. Now, this is a set of US statistics, but it shows a glorious hockey stick of profits rising there for those cybercrime enterprises over the last while. Now, the core question we want to have here is, why are the bad guys going to choose you over somebody else? You know, it's an interesting question. You know, is it the fact that, you know, you're a multi-trillion-dollar company? Is it the fact that, you know, you've got loads and loads of secret data? No, they're probably going to choose you because you're easy. You're exposed to the internet. You know, you've got those services that are out there. And the bigger and more successful a company you are, chances are the more legacy exchange servers that are out there, the more databases that are connected to the internet, the more business control systems that are connected to the internet that really should never have been connected to the internet. There's credentials available. You've got employees out there. You've got people that are reusing passwords. You've got all of these things that might be out there on the dark web. And again, you know, we're all budget conscious. You know, the default configuration for lots of things might be left out there as well. So all of these things are out there. And with those weak controls and with those things that are happening, this is how targets are going to be picked. And, you know, as well as all of those things that are happening, you can make things easy for these people as well. We've got local admins flying about the place. We can run any piece of software that we want on those endpoints. There's no visibility into what your end users are doing. And, you know, you've only got those reactive security tools in place. You know, when the alarm bell rings, then you'll go and do something rather than preventing a bad thing from happening. Now, maybe it isn't the case in this particular gathering, but oftentimes there's the myth that we're too small. But that's not the case. Small, medium enterprises are actually ideal here, especially in a European context where we've got lots and lots of small businesses that have very, very high value customers. So there's lots and lots of useful data out there with small to medium enterprises. I might be a small widget maker, but I'm supplying my widget to Rolls-Royce. So suddenly I'm a really important part of a supply chain. And, you know, oftentimes when you're dealing with these smaller places, there's less mature controls. But really, we've got the same data. We've got the same, you know, really important stuff that's out there. But there's weaker defenses in place. Now, I've tried to pick, you know, the most old school set of icons that we can possibly find out here because, you know, no matter what, it's still the usual tools that people try to get into your enterprise with. It's going to be phishing, stolen credentials, remote access tools, living off the LAN binaries, all of the classics. It really, really hasn't changed. You know, the attacks might have gotten a little bit faster and a little bit more sophisticated. You know, you can point Mythos at something and it'll find a hole faster than a young person who's never seen an old-fashioned Exchange server. But all of these things are still out there. And one other thing is an attack succeeds after they're in there. Once they're in, they've got their dwell time, they discover what's out there, they do their recon, you know, so it's the stopping the post-access activity is oftentimes going to be the most important thing that you can do. And having a zero trust environment and having allow listing in place is really where you can really put a halt to those to the lateral movement. Once an initial attack has been successful. Now, everybody wants to prevent things, and it's a bit of an illusion because you've got AVs in place, you've got EDRs in place. None of this amounts to prevention. All of these things kick in after something has happened, after the malware has been downloaded, after the attacker has gained the initial access, after somebody's found an unlocked workstation. And this is where detection is good. You have to assume compromise. But all this detection is going to do is it's going to give you lots and lots of alerts. And that really doesn't imply protection. It just tells you that something is going on. Now, when your traditional tools that are out there, they're all really concerned with a signature. They're concerned with a pattern. They're trying to, they're concerned with discovering what's going on rather than preventing things from happening. Really, you could almost think of it as a malware-first mindset. They're thinking about what would a malware author do? What do the existing pieces of malware do? And in this case, it's going to miss lots and lots of other instances. If I'm in an environment and I'm a relatively competent hacker, I'm able to write my own scripts. I'm able to leverage PowerShell. I realize that if .NET's on a machine, you've got a full C# compiler. You can do what you like in those machines. You don't need to go and download malware. And if you're dealing with more sophisticated actors, they'll have access to their suite of 0 days and things like that. And those traditional tools aren't aware of these things. So, they're problematic in that regard. And again, this is probably the most common thing that you'll see with an attack, is living off the land. They don't go to some, scary North Korean or Russian website and download the latest hacker tool, like you see in the movies. Instead, they leverage your own utilities against you. They take PowerShell, run DLL, and they chain useful utilities together, and they live off the land and start causing problems. So, and then another place where we're going to fail is alert fatigue. How many attacks recently have happened, when your SOC is drowning in noise? There's you're spammed, there's DDoSes and things like that, all to conceal another attack that's taking place. So the real attacks are going to blend into the noise that your SOC is experiencing. And really, when situations like that happen, the mean time for response, it just becomes far too long, and those traditional tools are going to fall over. So really, when it comes to your traditional tools, the problem that they have is if a piece of software can run on your environment, it can be abused. You run Spotify on a machine, Spotify has access to all of the data that you've got access to. You run an open source utility that might have a compromised version of FFmpeg in it or something like that. It has access to all of the data that you've got access to as well. So what we want to do is we want to take the idea of default deny, and it's going to flip all of this on its head. What we want to do is we want to block everything, and we want to make your business into a hard target for these particular types of threats. So when we create a business that's, in ThreatLocker terms, a hard target, we're going to make sure that any action that takes place on your endpoints must be explicitly allowed. Nothing can arbitrarily run. If somebody downloads something, it's going to be denied by default. If somebody creates a new script, it's going to be denied by default. Any privileged access that's required in an environment, whether it's sudo on a Linux system, admin access on Windows, it must be temporary. Any lateral movement that can happen needs to be blocked. If I, as an attacker, gain access to workstation A, I shouldn't be able to move to B, I shouldn't be able to get to servers. We need to block any of that lateral movement. And if you take those kind of basic concepts, the blast radius of any breach or unauthorized access is going to be minimized. Okay, and again, with this hard target, it's really a control versus detection idea. We want to control things. If you're in control, you stop the bad things before they execute. You stop it before it happens. If you're dealing with detection, You see the bad thing happening, you try to stop it, but all of this is going to be after the fact. And oftentimes, when you fall into that, it's going to be too late. You don't want that. So what we're going to do is, again, this is very common to everyone here. We're all IT professionals, and this has been knocking about the place for God knows how long. Zero trust. Trust nothing by default. Verify absolutely everything explicitly, and assume that a breach is inevitable. There's a bad guy, casing your business already, or there's somebody in there already, whether it's an insider threat or it's a bad actor that's just there dwelling, waiting to go and exploit your environment. So what we're going to do is, the first thing we'll do is default deny. Nothing can run unless it's allowed. Anything unknown is not allowed. And then the trusted software that you have in your environment, it's still going to be controlled. We've got this concept of ring fencing where you're allowed to run PowerShell, you're allowed to run Visual Studio, you're allowed to run Bash or whatever shell you want to run, but they're going to be controlled. We want to limit what they're able to do in your environment. And doing this, we reduce the attack surface. If there's fewer executables, fewer scripts, and fewer admin actions in the environment, again, you become a harder target. There's less processes to exploit, there's less stack overflows or buffer overflows for people to go and try to use. And the outcome here is going back to those business principles that we're talking about. If you make your environment, difficult for the bad guys, the attacker is going to move on. The process is too slow. Why am I going to waste, 5, 6, 7 hours trying to get an outcome in your company when I can move on to the next one? It's too noisy. Because again, I try to run a utility, it fails, so when the alert gets through to your SOC, it's going to be a valid alert, and it's too expensive, whether in time or burning my 0 days, burning my utilities by using it in your environment. And what we do in ThreatLocker, and come talk to us at the stand afterwards if you're interested, is firstly, it's our application control. And what this is it's a set of explicit allow listing. We're going to help you allow only the software you need and block everything else. Now, it's great blocking things, but you also need to be able to allow people to request software to run. So we make that really easy as well. And we also give you the ability to test that software in a sandbox. We give you business intelligence about it and things like that. So you're making an informed choice about anything that is running in your environment. Then this is where things get really interesting. It's application containment. And application containment is pretty vital when you think about 0 days, when you think about working software being exploited. In my little example here, we've got Microsoft Word. The world runs off Word, Excel, PowerPoint. If you stop people from using it, you're going to have chaos on your hands. So what we do here is we recognize Word can get out to the internet. Word can access the registry. Word can access all of the various settings in your environment. It can access your file system. Word's got an entire programming language embedded in it with macros. The newer versions give you give you access to Python and things like that. So what we'll do is we'll take those trusted applications that you have in your environment and apply these ring fencing rules, which will allow you to run those applications and make sure that they can't break out of their sandbox and get to the internet and grab a payload, change a setting in the registry that might disable your security tools on the next boot, kick off a script that might start causing problems. So if you contain your trusted applications, again, you reduce the attack surface for the bad guys. Again, you want to manage privilege. So no standing admin rights on a system. Remove it all. Then everything, when it gets to be elevated, should be just in time. The Sage updater needs privileged access. Let's grant the Sage updater that privileged access. We don't want somebody entering a password. Well, we can use our agent to do that elevation for you. And then we want to provide you a full audit trail of everything that happens as well. You don't want to be surprised by anything that's going on. So again, you need access to all of that. And all of that is really, really useful. But how do we go and achieve it? So we deploy an agent. And when that agent gets deployed, The first thing it does is it learns everything that's happening in your environment. We see the software that's running, we see the scripts that are running, the pieces of the file system that are being accessed, the network connections that are being made. Then we'll review what's there, and that's always done as a collaborative process. And in that review, you'll spot, okay, all of this I expect, but why are these 3 people running WinSCP? Why is this person, running PSExec? You might discover there's some shadow IT processes going on out there. There's various things that you might want to block. So, you go and review what's happening. And then finally, you secure those endpoints. And once they're secured, that's where our zero trust kicks in. From now on, nothing new can run on those endpoints. And by doing this, we're going to help you streamline that stack that you're running. It's an integrated platform, so everything is there. You're controlling your applications, controlling what they can do. You've got visibility of everything that's happening as well. And there's a unified kind of policy that's controlling everything that's going on as well. And again, our kind of the core thing that we try to do is give you this visibility, give you this control without there being noise involved. Because again, there's an awful lot of very, very stressed support staff out there with their phone buzzing every 13 seconds because, somebody has copied a bunch of files, somebody's deleted something, somebody's moved something. So we want to give you that visibility without the noise. So only actions are going to be logged. That's going to help with the alert fatigue. There's less things going on. And really, for all of us here, a decision is going to be far better than a dashboard. Make a choice, yes or no, rather than looking at a trend graph and trying to decide if this is something that we want to allow to happen or not. And the real world impact that we see from implementing something like this is really ransomware fails. If somebody is tricked into downloading something, if somebody manages to bring a piece of malware into an environment, if you've got default deny in place, it fails. It can't execute. The phishing payload dies. Somebody falls victim to, one of those clever things, where they tell you go to a website, hit Control-C, then Windows or and paste. That's going to fail. It's an unknown script that's running in the environment, so that stops. And any of that insider risk is going to be reduced as well. Whether it's an actual bad guy who tries to run something in your system, or somebody who works in a warehouse that wants to watch the Croatian basketball final and they download a dodgy streamer, they're not going to be able to do it because we have that default deny in place. And really, there's a kill chain. If we can break any link in this chain, the ransomware is going to fail. We stop their initial access, it fails. We stop them from being able to recon your environment, it'll fail. Stop them from moving laterally, it's going to fail. Make sure they can't exfiltrate data, they can't run their payloads, they can't encrypt things. Once we have that in place, you really are in a better position than everybody else. And most security tools that you have out there at the moment fail because they mightn't alert you until the encryption starts. And how many files get encrypted before your EDR kicks in? Is it 1? Is it 10? Is it 15? Who knows, but it started and you have the regulatory requirements now to go and start reporting this and recovering from the attack. Or it fails during the exfiltration. When does your exfil alarm kick in? After 100 megabytes, after a gigabyte, after 1,000 files? Who knows? And by the time those tools kick in, sorry, it's too late. You need to start, disaster recovery process. Whereas if we try to make life as hard as possible for these guys, the recon is blocked, so they can't discover where your data is. The tools to encrypt your data can't run. The scripts to exfiltrate the data can't run. If they can't do any of this, what's the point for the bad guys? And if they can't execute, there's no ransomware. If the encryption never begins, if the exfiltration never begins, you can't be held hostage by those bad guys. And back again to the previous point, your attacker wants speed, they want certainty, and if you make it difficult for them, it's just not worth their while. You're not worth it if they can't get in and get out in a nice, clean way. And really, it's a business decision. Downtime costs you money. your reputation costs even more. And really, if you can prevent something, it's always going to be a better option than having to recover. And really, again, this is where, I hope I wasn't too salesy, but this is where it kicks in. If you've got default deny, least privilege, application control, and you restrict behavior, you're really making yourself, not an attractive target for those bad guys. And, again, you want fewer incidents. You want to give your SOC team a break to actually look at real risks rather than noise. And really, as kind of a final takeaway, you don't need to be unhackable, and this is where it's cynical. You just need to be that little bit harder than the next company. Hopefully they'll move on and pick somebody else. Make them pick somebody else. Control everything. Privilege, behavior, execution. Once you're on top of that, again, you're making yourself a difficult choice for people. So really, our takeaway is block unauthorized software, and that unauthorized software includes ransomware and various other things that are going on. So we've got a few, fairly big partners out there, and I think most of us can hear those jets flying overhead at the moment. So recently, we've been deployed in Heathrow, and that's quite interesting. And if you want to talk to any of the guys there, talk to us at the desk, and we can help you, get in touch with those various people. We have a few new cool features that are coming out in this year. So again, we can bore you silly about all of those at the desk if you need to. And thanks everyone for listening. Oops, I went too far. If anyone wants to book a demo, you can either scan the QR or talk to us at the desk. So thanks everyone for your time, and I appreciate you listening to me for the last half an hour. Thanks everyone.